The clock in the hallway struck 13, and I was the only one who heard it. Evan Calloway didn't believe in omens. He didn't believe in anything he couldn't measure, repair, or rebuild. But tonight, standing in the darkened hallway of the old Bedwell estate, rain rattling against warped windows, he began to reconsider. The house had been abandoned for decades, yet the air felt warm, almost breathing. Dust motes drifted in the narrow beam of his flashlight, and every step he took on the creaking floor sounded like a warning. He'd come here to appraise an antique grandfather clock rumored to be worth a fortune. A masterpiece of mechanical artistry, the estate agent had called it. But the agent failed to mention the whispers in the walls, the faint ticking that seemed to come from inside his skull, or the strange metallic smell curling down from the second floor. And then the sound that stopped him cold. Bong. Followed by 12 more deliberate chimes. The grandfather clock stood in the main parlor, towering over him like a sentinel. Its wooden casing was carved with faces, hundreds of them, each one unique, each twisted in the agony of a silent scream. The pendulum swung too smoothly, like a blade through water. The second hand twitched occasionally as if resisting something unseen. He crouched to inspect the gears, and froze. There was no mechanism. The cavity where the movement should have been was empty, nothing but shadows and a faint, pulsing glow. A voice drifted behind him. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Evan turned to find an old man standing in the doorway, thin as a wire, wearing a suit that might have been stitched a century ago. His eyes were pale yellow but alive with a kind of gleeful hunger. "My father made it," the man said, stepping closer. "It doesn't keep time. It keeps you." The air grew heavier. The rain outside slowed, drops stretching unnaturally in midair before sliding down the glass. Somewhere deep in the walls, other clocks began ticking in unison, though he saw no other clocks in the house. The old man led Evan through the dim corridors, every step accompanied by that relentless ticking. Doors lined the hall, dozens of them, each marked with a small brass plate engraved with a date. Some dates were centuries old. Others were in the future. From behind the doors came muffled sounds, sobs, frantic whispers, and something like fingernails scraping metal. "You'll stay, of course," the man said. "Everyone does once they've heard the 13th chime. That's when the clock knows your name." Evan tried to laugh it off. "I'm just here for the appraisal. I'll be gone in an hour." But when he reached for his phone, the screen displayed 10:07 p.m., the same time it had shown when he entered the house. The battery icon didn't move. The signal bars were gone. He turned a corner and found himself back in the parlor. The clock's hands were spinning now. Faster, faster, faster. And between the spinning hands, Evan thought he saw his own face, warped and screaming, trapped behind the glass. Panic set in. He ran, slamming open doors, finding endless rooms filled with half-finished clocks, each one humming with a faint heartbeat. Inside some, faces peered from behind the glass, eyes wide in eternal terror. The old man followed, his footsteps impossibly slow, but somehow always close. "You can't run from time," the man said, smiling faintly. "It's been yours longer than you realize." Evan stumbled back into the hallway with the brass-plated doors. Desperate, he yanked one open. Inside was himself, older, hair streaked with white, eyes hollow, pounding on the glass from the other side. His future self mouthed a single word. "Don't." But the door slammed shut on its own. And then, silence. Evan turned, and the grandfather clock loomed before him, though he had no memory of walking toward it. The pendulum stopped. The second hand clicked once. The old man whispered in his ear. 13. The clock's face split open like a maw and the darkness pulled him inside. The next morning, the estate agent unlocked the front door for another appraiser. The parlor was silent, empty but for the grandfather clock. It stood still, except for one small detail. It started with the sound of footsteps on the ice. Nora had been alone for hours, trudging across the frozen lake with her pack. No other tents, no campfires, no voices, just miles of pale white stretching into the northern darkness. But now, the ice beneath her boots whispered. Not the familiar crackle of freezing water, but measured steps, following hers exactly a half-second behind. She stopped. The sound stopped too. A wall of wind hit her so cold it burned. Her eyes watered, and the air smelled of something impossibly out of place, warm, metallic like fresh blood on snow. From the fog ahead a shape emerged. Thin. Too tall. Its head tilted like it was listening. When she blinked it was gone. But something deep inside her bones whispered, "It's still here." She reached the old surveyor's cabin at dusk. The wooden structure groaned in the wind, its roof burdened with decades of snow. Inside, two other researchers, Dan and Elise, huddled over a sputtering kerosene heater. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Elise joked. Nora didn't laugh. She kept her gloves on even inside, her fingers still numb. Her skin felt strange, like her blood had been replaced with something heavier. Outside, the wind howled, but in its rise and fall there was a pattern, almost words. Dan dismissed it as wind playing tricks. Nora didn't. That night, she dreamed she was standing barefoot on the lake's frozen surface. The ice was so thin she could see shapes moving beneath, long, pale limbs swimming upward. When she woke, her gloves were off. Her fingertips were black with frostbite. She hadn't felt a thing. The next morning, Elise found Dan's parka on the floor, the door wide open. His footprints led into the whiteness, but halfway across the lake they simply stopped. No break in the ice. No body. Just nothing. Elise panicked, insisting they pack and leave, but the radio was dead. The wind carried voices now, Dan's voice, calling faintly from somewhere deep below the ice. Nora strangely felt calm. Her skin no longer burned in the cold. She could walk outside without shivering. The frostbite on her fingers hadn't worsened. In fact, the skin had turned pale and smooth, almost translucent. But when she looked at her reflection in the cabin window, her pupils were rimmed with white. That night, the thing from the fog returned. It stood just beyond the treeline, staring through the cabin window. Its face was smooth, featureless, but the skin shimmered as though something inside was moving, swimming. She couldn't tell if it was wearing her clothes, or her skin. Elise tried to flee, but the snowstorm swallowed her whole. Nora followed, her steps silent now, not crunching but gliding over the ice. She found Elise near the lake's center, kneeling, hands pressed flat to the surface. Beneath the ice, dozens of pale faces stared upward, mouths opening in slow unison. One face was Dan's. Another was Nora's own. Elise turned, tears freezing on her cheeks. "It wants you back." Before Nora could speak, the ice split open. A rush of impossible warmth surged upward, and something pulled Elise under. The air filled with the same smell as before, metallic, thick, like breath from another mouth pressed against hers.